Ever since we got Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, there are now 10 superhero trilogies. It feels like there should be more with the amount of superhero movies we get, but nope, there's only 10. Also, I am not including superhero quadrilogies as that will be saved for another video. Spoilers ahead, and with that all out of the way.
Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. Take a look and you'll see into your imagination.
Coming in at number 10, the OG X-Men trilogy. So I was never really a big fan of the OG X-Men movies. I much prefer the First Class X-Men movies and the First Class X-Men team as well, more than the leathered suit OG X-Men team and movies. The first two movies I found to be okay, and the last movie in the trilogy was absolutely terrible. One of the worst superhero movies of all time. To this day, I find it to be the worst X-Men movie of all time as well. Like, I find it to be worse than Origins of Wolverine. At least with Origins of Wolverine, I can find some stupid enjoyment out of that. Unlike this movie where it's just pure frustration. The only good thing about The Last Stand is Wolverine, but the rest of the movie was trash. I know a lot of people like the first two X-Men movies a lot, and many consider the second X-Men movie to be one of the best comic book movies of all time. But I just don't see it. I just find there to be pacing issues, and some of the characterizations and adaptations of the X-Men and X-Men characters were done really poorly in my opinion, especially Cyclops. He was dealt a really bad hand in the first two X-Men movies, and then the third one they just randomly kill him off. Also, Jean Grey was done really poorly in these movies too. It's like nothing like the Jean Grey from the comics, and they butchered the Phoenix storyline. They've done it twice. They've tried to do the Phoenix storyline 2 times, and they've done it horribly each time. Also, I hate their suits in these movies. Like, I get these are early 2000 comic book movies, but also in the early 2000s we had Spider-Man and Fantastic Four, and those suits from Fantastic Four aren't great, but at least they're comic book accurate, and they look like they are superhero costumes, unlike secret agent costumes. Like, it's so weird seeing Wolverine in this ugly leather costume. This is a superhero trilogy I don't really like and don't really care for overall. Coming in at number 9, the Ant-Man trilogy. The first Ant-Man movie I thought was solid, and it was a superhero movie with the main character being a dad, which was new at the time for the MCU. The first Ant-Man movie tried some new things in terms of MCU superhero standards, but it was a bit generic. Ant-Man and the Wasp was okay and very generic, but it was fun in a good way. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania was just terrible. Like, really bad. I don't understand why this movie doesn't get more hate. It's a mess. It's a really bad mess. It gives me a headache. The CGI was just painful to look at, and there was just really corny moments that were meant for 3-year-olds in like a Disney movie. Like, there was this one scene I keep remembering. Every time I think of this movie, I just think of the one scene where the one character was like, "Oh, I have holes.
I have holes!
I didn't know you could do that.
It was so cringe. This movie is just cringe. Like, that's the best way to describe this. Also, this movie was supposed to set up Kang as the big bad of the MCU, and this movie did a piss poor job of doing that, and he got beaten by a bunch of ants. And yes, I know those ants were somehow super powerful. Just picturing the big bad of the new MCU, like the new Thanos, getting beaten by freaking ants. That's just terrible. It's a horrible image to have. I don't care how powerful the ants are. If I saw Thanos getting beaten by a bunch of ants, like, I wouldn't feel anything for him. He wouldn't be intimidating. He wouldn't be scary. I wouldn't be like, oh crap, we gotta take this guy seriously. It would just be a joke. Kang was turned into a joke in this movie. Jonathan Majors did do a really good performance, but at the end of the day, it was just a joke. Ant-Man 3 kind of killed my excitement for the future of the MCU in many ways. I do have to say Paul Rudd is great in these movies, though. Coming in number 8, the Iron Man trilogy. With how popular Iron Man is as a character and how popular Iron Man is within the MCU, I would feel like he would have had a better trilogy. But looking back at it, his trilogy really wasn't that great. The first movie is great, don't get me wrong. It was a great start for Iron Man, a great start for the MCU, and a really good start for the potential of a really great trilogy. The second Iron Man movie was just okay, and then the third Iron Man movie I didn't really like that much. I would say it's a bad movie, but it has a lot of issues. The writing is just not that great, and I don't like the plot twist of the movie. It's really dumb. It's one of the only MCU trilogies where I feel like it could stand on its own, and it has a beginning and an ending, and even has an ending for Iron Man as a character, but then they kept continuing his character for the better in my opinion, in the following movies. At the end of the day, the Iron Man trilogy is really just not that great, has a lot of issues, and it's just kind of meh. Coming in number 7, the Blade trilogy. Now, the Blade trilogy is kind of underrated in my opinion. I mean, you have a really solid first movie, a solid second movie, a little bit better than the first movie, and then you have a third movie that's not so great. But I don't think it's that bad either. Like, I know the Blade trilogy gets a lot of hate. I don't think it's really that bad. It's just not that good. You have Wesley Snipes in this trilogy, who is really great. Not really that great in the third movie because, you know, behind the scene issues with him and stuff, but in the first two movies, he's great. Wesley Snipes as Blade was one of the best comic book castings of all time. So yeah, the Blade movies need more love. It's a pretty solid story for the first two movies. Third movie's not that good. Not horrible, but not that good either. Like, I'd rather watch Blade 3 than watch Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania or a lot of the newer MCU movies. Like, it's not that bad in my opinion. You also got Ryan Reynolds in the third movie. Like, he kind of saves it in many ways. But yeah, the Blade Trinity is not an amazing trilogy or anything. I would just say it's kind of underrated. It's a solid trilogy. Coming in number 6, the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Alright, I know I'm going to get some heat for this one. I know the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy is beloved by many people, and it would be in someone's top 3 favorite superhero trilogies of all time. But for me, it's not, and I find these movies to be a bit overrated. If you have watched previous videos on my channel, you know I'm not the biggest fan of these movies. I don't dislike them. I just, like I said, find them to be a little overrated. So to break it down a bit, I liked the first Spider-Man movie. I felt like Spider-Man 1 was pretty good. Spider-Man 2 was just alright. It has a lot of great moments, a lot of very good, serious moments. It has a lot of heart, and like I said, there's a lot of great moments in Spider-Man 2, but at the same time, there's a lot of moments I dislike and a lot of things I dislike in Spider-Man 2, like Mary Jane, the whole reason for why he loses his powers, and it's very different from the Spider-Man No More, like the whole storyline from the comics. I know it's taken inspiration from that storyline, but I just found the whole reason for why he doesn't want to be Spider-Man no more, and the whole reason why he lost his powers, I thought was kind of stupid. And then you have Spider-Man 3, which I feel is a god-awful movie. I know in recent years the movie has had some praise, and people love to meme the crap out of that movie, but it's really hard to watch, especially with a lot of the cringe scenes. And I know the cringe dancing, Bully Maguire and all that, I know it's all fun to make fun of it, but the fact that this was actually in a Spider-Man movie, the fact that he had the weird dance, the fact that he had like the emo hair, it was just so stupid. And they ruined the characters in this movie. There's just too much crap going on. So you have one pretty good Spider-Man movie, you got one alright Spider-Man movie, and then you have one that's not really good. With that all being said, that's why the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy is at number 6 for me. Coming in at number 5, the Wolverine trilogy. Not only is this trilogy very inconsistent, each movie in this trilogy pretty much stands on its own. It feels like each Wolverine movie is in its own universe. With that being said, Origins of Wolverine, not really good. The Wolverine is alright. It's kind of forgettable in some ways, but you know, it's a pretty solid movie. And then you have Logan, which is one of the best superhero movies of all time. And in my opinion, I think it's the best crafted superhero movie. It's not my favorite. If I had to say, like, from an objective standpoint, and we all know film isn't really that objective, but from like a writing standpoint, from a directing standpoint, acting standpoint, I feel Logan is the best comic book, superhero, you name it, type of movie of all time. Logan on its own pretty much boosts this trilogy to number 5 on my list. Coming in number 4, the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. This trilogy just wrapped this year, and it had a really good ending. And I'm surprised that the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy is at number 4. I mean, I'm not that surprised, but it's just astonishing that James Gunn just made a trilogy out of unknown characters, an unknown team, and he turned it to one of the best superhero trilogies of all time, made some of the best superhero movies of all time. Mainly talking about the first and third movie. The second movie's okay. Didn't really hit with me. I think it's one of James Gunn's worst movies of all time, but at least that movie had heart, it had character, it had a great story overall from beginning to end, the Guardians trilogy. And what James Gunn was able to do with the Guardians trilogy was just incredible. He had a great vision from beginning to end, and it's sad that the Guardians movies are over. Hopefully they are over, and I really don't want to see any more Guardians of the Galaxy movies without James Gunn behind it. I'm okay seeing Star-Lord in future movies. Not really, but you know, I'm kind of okay with it, especially since his character's ending kind of was open-ended. But yeah, James Gunn made a really great superhero trilogy. Coming in number 3, the MCU Spider-Man trilogy. Again, I feel like I'm going to get some heat for this one. I know MCU Spider-Man is very controversial. Some people love him, some people hate him. I actually, I really like the MCU Spider-Man. I love Tom Holland's performance. I love the first and last movie, the No Way Home and Homecoming. I don't really like Far From Home too much. Actually, I pretty much dislike that movie with a passion because I could go on like a whole rant on why I dislike Far From Home. But I really love Homecoming and I really love No Way Home. I just wish Far From Home was good. It's like a decent movie, but it's a bad Spider-Man movie, in my opinion. When you look at this trilogy as a whole, it is kind of a mess with kind of like an inconsistent story. Like you start from the beginning in Homecoming where, oh, he's just in high school and he's like trying to learn how to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and he learns that he doesn't want to be under Iron Man's wing and doesn't want to be an Avenger. He wants to be friends with Iron Man, but he doesn't really want to be an Avenger, and that was kind of like the whole message of the first movie. To then you get to No Way Home, and he's dealing with Doctor Strange and magic, and you have Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Mans in this movie, and this is the first MCU movie to introduce the multiverse as a concept. It's kind of inconsistent when it comes to the overall story. I mean, you could say Peter Parker Spider-Man has a consistent story, like a beginning to end, like he learns how to be his own hero, I guess, even though that was kind of the message of the first movie, and it kind of was stretched till the last movie. Each movie, I felt like Spider-Man had like a different story arc for what his future was going to look like, and I guess they finally came up to a conclusion for what Spider-Man was going to be like for the MCU. But yeah, I really love Homecoming and I really love No Way Home, so that's why the MCU Spider-Man is at number 3, and I think those movies deserve more love. Coming in number 2, the Captain America trilogy. I gotta say, this is a very consistent trilogy in terms of quality. First Avenger, Winter Soldier, they're great movies. I think First Avenger deserves more love, but I think a lot of Marvel fans are at agreement that First Avenger is a pretty good movie. Some love it, some find it to be pretty good. I feel First Avenger is a great superhero movie, and it's a very good movie in general. Then you have Winter Soldier, another great movie, a very good sequel to First Avenger, and then you have Civil War, which is the best of the three in my opinion, and one of the best superhero movies of all time. And I think it's like third for me, like my third or fourth favorite superhero movie of all time. I love Civil War. But yeah, the Captain America trilogy is the second best superhero trilogy of all time for me, and it's the best MCU trilogy in my opinion. But coming in number 1, to no one's surprise, the Dark Knight trilogy. Now these are a set of great movies from beginning to end. Christopher Nolan is a genius, and what he did with Batman, once again, genius. I love The Dark Knight. I love The Dark Knight Rises. Batman Begins, I feel, is the weaker of the 3 movies. I know some people feel Dark Knight Rises is the weakest film. I feel personally Batman Begins is. And that's a pretty solid movie. Like, I would give that like an 8.4 out of 10. But The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises are both like 9 out of 10. And just from a filmmaking standpoint, I feel these movies are really, really good. I know Dark Knight Rises has some plot holes, but what they do with the characters in that movie, the villain, just really great stuff. I'm not sure if the Dark Knight trilogy is going to be beaten anytime soon. Maybe Matt Reeves' The Batman trilogy could beat the Dark Knight trilogy sometime in the future. The Dark Knight right now remains king as the best superhero trilogy of all time. So that's my list of what I consider to be the best superhero trilogies of all time. I feel like the Spider-Man ones are going to rile some people up and be a bit controversial. Not really sure. There's a lot of passionate Spider-Man fans out there for MCU Spider-Man, for Raimi Spider-Man, for Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. I think they're all pretty good in their own way. I just consider Tom Holland Spider-Man to be the best, in live action at least. But yeah, it's kind of crazy how we have 10 superhero trilogies out there, and hopefully we get some good superhero trilogies in the future.